March 28, 1996, Summers, New York. A mailroom clerk at PepsiCo's world headquarters slits open a heavy registered envelope. Inside is a cashier's check. She reads the amount once, then she reads it again. $708.50, made out to PepsiCo, Incorporated. Stapled behind it is a single order form, torn from the official Pepsi Stuff catalog. 15 Pepsi points are logged along the top, and at the bottom, in the blank line reserved for the prize, someone has written 2 words in pencil, in plain block letters. 1 Harrier jet. She carries the envelope to her supervisor's desk. Her supervisor reads it and does not laugh. She reads it a second time and picks up the phone. Within 24 hours, 3 attorneys from PepsiCo's general counsel are standing in a conference room on an upper floor, passing the same sheet of paper between them, without a word. Because by the literal wording of PepsiCo's own printed catalog, every clause, every rule, every number the company itself published and mailed to 2 million American households, the customer who sent this envelope has just legally purchased a 40,000-pound vertical takeoff Marine Corps attack aircraft for the price of a small house. The attorneys do not yet know who he is. They do not know that the answer is sitting 3,000 miles away in Seattle. They do not know that he is 21 years old, that he has no money, no airplane, and no license to fly anything at all. They know only 3 things, and none of them have answers yet. How could a promotional catalog possibly become a contract for a warplane? Why did it take 1 college student and not a single person inside a $2 billion marketing department to notice? And what, exactly, was printed on the page that no one at PepsiCo had ever thought to read closely enough? To understand what he found, you have to go back to a room where none of this seemed possible. BBDO Worldwide, Madison Avenue, New York, October 1995. A glass-walled conference room on the 30th floor of the largest advertising agency in the country. For a decade, Pepsi had been losing. The cola wars were going the wrong way. Generation X preferred Coke. The numbers said so every quarter. And Pepsi's marketing budget for 1995 ran to nearly $1 billion with little to show for it. Pepsi Stuff was Bilio's answer. The structure was simple, and the simplicity was the point. Customers would collect Pepsi points printed on the underside of bottle caps. They would trade those points for branded merchandise out of a 64-page catalog. T-shirts, leather jackets, mountain bikes, sunglasses. $5 million was set aside for production, printing, and distribution. 2 million copies of the catalog were printed and mailed to homes, campuses, and vending locations across all 50 states. The television commercial was the centerpiece. 30 seconds, prime-time rotation, NBC, Fox, and the major cable networks. A teenager in a Pepsi t-shirt walks into a high school courtyard. Above him, an AV-8B Harrier, a real vertical takeoff military attack jet, drops out of the sky and lands beside him. The principal's hat blows off in the downdraft, and across the bottom of the screen, 1 line of white text. Harrier jet, 7 million Pepsi points. There is no asterisk. There is no fine print. There is no disclaimer, no on-screen warning. Nothing in 9-point type running along the bottom of the frame. The creative team approved it in the room. The marketing department approved it in the room. And on no record that survives, the campaign that would print 2 million catalogs and air on national television did not cross the desk of a single lawyer. Here is the thing every one of them assumed, and none of them checked. In American law, an advertisement is almost never a promise. It is an invitation for the customer to step forward and make an offer, which the seller is then free to accept or turn down. Almost never. There is one old, narrow exception to that rule. In October 1995, nobody in that glass room was thinking about it. And there is one more detail worth holding on to, because it comes back. The jet was in the commercial. The commercial pointed viewers to the catalog. And the catalog, the actual, printed list of things a person could actually buy, ran 64 pages of shirts and jackets and bicycles. What the catalog did not list, anywhere, on any page, was a Harrier jet. Remember that. 3,000 miles west, a business student was about to read that catalog with the seriousness of a man reading a will. John Leonard was born in 1974 in the Pacific Northwest. By the fall of 1995, he was 21. studying business administration at the University of Washington, and teaching part-time as an outdoor education instructor. His parents had divorced when he was young. He lived with his mother and stepfather in a modest house outside Seattle. Tall, fit, quiet. He climbed mountains in his spare time. He kept a calculator in his backpack. He read business textbooks for pleasure. One Thursday night in late October, he was watching television with his stepfather when the Pepsi spot ran in the middle of a sitcom break. The teenager walked into the courtyard. The jet came down. The hat blew off. His stepfather laughed. Leonard did not laugh. He picked up the remote and paused the tape. Then he rewound it and played the spot again. He read the line on the screen, Harrier jet, 7 million Pepsi points, and he copied it down on the back of a napkin. Most people watched that commercial and understood it the way they understood everything on television. As a joke, you were not meant to carry home with you. That is the quiet agreement between an audience and an advertiser. Nobody signs it. Everybody keeps it. Leonard was the rare kind of person who had never quite agreed to it. The kind who reads what is written and assumes it was meant, who hears a promise and expects it to be kept. In a world that runs on the understanding that some promises are only for show, that is either a flaw or a weapon. Over the next 4 years, it would be both. His stepfather told him what anyone would have told him. It's an ad. Forget about it. He did not forget about it. The next morning, he mailed off the small administrative fee to receive the official 64-page catalog. The catalog arrived in early November. He read it 3 times. Page 17. The official rules of the promotion. 5 paragraphs, 8-point type. This was the page the whole thing stood on, and it was the page he read most carefully of all. He found 3 things. First, the program required a minimum of 15 original Pepsi points, real bottle caps, cut from real Pepsi products. 15, that was the floor. Second, above that floor of 15, any additional points a customer needed to reach a prize could be purchased directly from PepsiCo, 10 cents each, payable by personal check or money order. Third, the catalog set no maximum, no ceiling, no cap per customer, no cap per prize, nothing. Then he did the arithmetic that a $2 billion marketing department had never once sat down to do. The jet cost 7 million points. 15 of them had to come from real bottle caps. One trip to a supermarket, about $5. The remaining 6,999,985 points could, by the plain text of page 17, simply be bought at 10 cents each. 6,999,985 times 10 cents. $699,998.50 plus $10 for shipping. $700,008.50. For comparison, the Department of Defense list price for a single AV-8B Harrier in 1996 was about $33,800,000. Set the 2 numbers side by side, and the ratio comes out to roughly 1 to 48, a return of something near 4,700% in a single transaction, folded into a single envelope. Years later, he put the whole thing in one sentence. It wasn't, he said, a get-rich-quick scheme. It was a get-rich-once scheme. If it worked, you only had to do it one time. The math worked. The problem was the money. $700,000 was not a number a 21-year-old kept in a savings account. There was one man Leonard could think of, Todd Hoffman, mid-40s, a Seattle businessman who owned a wildlife photography company and held a spread of private investments. A serious climber, Leonard had met him in the Pacific Northwest mountaineering community 2 years earlier. In late February 1996, Leonard called him and asked for a meeting. He brought 3 things to the coffee shop: the catalog, his calculator, and a single page of handwritten math. Hoffman listened. Hoffman laughed. Then he stopped laughing and asked Leonard to read him the rules on page 17 again. Leonard read them.
Read the rules again.
Hoffman took
Slowly.
the catalog out of his hands and read the page himself, twice. He looked up. "You're telling me the catalog is the offer." "The catalog is the offer," Leonard said. "The rules are the contract, and nobody at Pepsi has read this." That was the moment it stopped being a college student's daydream.
Proceed.
A grown man with real money had just read the same page, in the same slow way, and landed in exactly the same place. They structured it that same evening. Hoffman would put up the full $700,000 in capital, issued as a cashier's check through his own bank, made out to PepsiCo, Incorporated. Leonard would prepare the submission, fill out the order form, and mail the package. If the jet came, Hoffman held the senior position. If Pepsi refused, they would share the fight. A few days later, Leonard stood at a supermarket shelf and bought 15 bottles of Pepsi. He cut the points from the necks of the bottles, 15 small pieces of cardboard, and set them on a table next to a cashier's check for the price of a house. For a moment there was nothing to do but look at the two of them, side by side. One more step, and none of it could be taken back. He filled out the order form. In the line reserved for the prize, he wrote, in pencil, 1 Harrier jet. On the morning of March 28, 1996, he walked into a Seattle post office carrying a heavy manila envelope, registered, insured for the full value of what was inside. He paid for the stamps, he signed the receipt, and he let it go. It traveled east for 4 days. PepsiCo's first response came within days. The corporation returned the cashier's check by registered mail, with a letter describing the Harrier element of the commercial as fanciful and humorous in nature. The letter came with a complimentary packet of coupons for free Pepsi, offered as a goodwill gesture. Leonard did not cash the coupons. He hired a Seattle law firm. The firm sent a formal demand letter to PepsiCo's general counsel, citing the catalog, citing the official rules, requesting delivery of 1 AV-8B Harrier jet, or a settlement equal to its market value. By the first week of August, PepsiCo's general counsel had finally done the one thing the marketing department had managed to avoid for 16 months. They read page 17, slowly, the way Leonard had, and they arrived at the same conclusion he had. Under the contract law of every state in the country, the catalog was an offer, the check was acceptance. The 15 real points were consideration, the thing of value that seals a bargain. On paper, John Leonard had a deal, which left PepsiCo with two options: deliver the jet or get to court before he did. They chose court. On August 6, 1996, PepsiCo filed a declaratory judgment action against John Leonard in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. The choice of court was itself a move. By filing first, in Pepsi's home federal court in Manhattan, the corporation locked the jurisdiction. Leonard, a Seattle man with no money, would now have to defend the case 3,000 miles from home, in a courtroom in Pepsi's own backyard. The case was assigned to Judge Kimba Wood. Pepsi's argument was one sentence long. The Harrier was obvious puffery. No reasonable American consumer could have believed the company was selling a military attack jet for the price of a house. No offer, therefore no contract. Leonard's argument was also one sentence: the catalog, the rules, the check, the deal. The story went national. The Wall Street Journal tracked the docket. The New York Times ran a feature. CNN sent a camera crew to Seattle. Then the Pentagon spoke. Asked at a press briefing whether the Marine Corps would in fact sell a Harrier to a private citizen, the Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, Kenneth Bacon, gave an answer that ran in newspapers coast to coast. The Harrier, he said, is not for sale to civilians, and even a demilitarized one would not make a very good lawn ornament. Asked for his own comment, Leonard matched the register exactly. He'd take the demilitarized version, he said. He just wanted to park it impressively at his college. And then Pepsi did the thing a marketing department only does when it is losing. While the lawsuit was still in discovery, they went back and re-edited the commercial that had started all of it. The Harrier's price on screen was raised from 7 million points to 700 million. At 10 cents a point, $70 million. More than twice what the aircraft was actually worth. And into the lower corner of the frame, they added 2 new words. Just kidding. The re-edited spot went back on the air. It was, all by itself, a confession. Leonard's lawyers marked it as a trial exhibit and set it aside for later. In the 18 months between the filing and the decision, PepsiCo spent more money preparing to argue that its own commercial had been a joke than Bibdo had spent making the commercial in the first place. On the morning of August 5, 1999, Judge Kimba Wood handed down a 63-page decision. John Leonard lost, on 3 grounds, and every one of them had been sitting in plain sight the whole time. Ground 1. An advertisement is not an offer. It is an invitation to negotiate. The customer who responds to an ad is the one making the offer, and the seller is free to accept it or refuse it. There is one narrow exception. From a 1957 Minnesota case, an advertisement can become a binding offer, but only when its terms are clear, definite, and explicit, and leave nothing open to negotiation. Judge Wood held the commercial to that standard. The commercial pointed viewers to the catalog. The catalog was the real, definitive list of prizes, and the catalog did not list the jet. That was the detail from the very first minutes. The jet was in the ad. It was never in the catalog. Ground 1. Ground 2. In American contract law, whether something is a serious offer is measured against what the courts call the objective, reasonable person, not what Leonard privately believed, not what Pepsi privately intended. What an ordinary, reasonable consumer, sitting on a couch in October 1995, would have understood the commercial to mean. And no reasonable consumer, the court held, could have believed a Fortune 500 company was handing out $33 million warplanes for the price of a Seattle house. She walked through the spot, element by element. A teenager flying a combat jet with no helmet, the jet wrecking school property as it landed, a vertical takeoff in a residential street, and marked each one as puffery. The harmless, non-actionable exaggeration that advertising is allowed. Ground 2. Ground 3. Under the Uniform Commercial Code, any contract for the sale of goods worth $500 or more has to be backed by a writing signed by the party you are trying to hold to it. The jet was a good. The price was well over $500. Leonard had a check. He had an order form. He did not have one single piece of paper signed by anyone at PepsiCo. Ground 3. Dismissed. Affirmed a year later on appeal. John Leonard lost cleanly. No offer. No reasonable belief, no signed writing. And yet, the thing the court did not say out loud is the thing worth staying on. To win this case, the second largest beverage company on earth had to stand up in federal court, on the record, and argue that the entire premise of one of its own national advertising campaigns had been a joke. It spent 3 years and roughly $2 million to establish that it had never meant a word of it. Pepsi did not lose in that courtroom. Pepsi had already lost, back in the glass room in 1995. The afternoon it approved a national campaign and mailed 2 million catalogs without letting a single lawyer read the one page the whole thing stood on. Everything that came after, the check, the lawsuit, the Pentagon, the 63 pages, was just the bill arriving. The lawyers walked out as the technical winners. The company walked out having testified against its own advertising. And every agency in the country was watching. In the months after the verdict, the major American agencies quietly rewrote their internal rules. The original spot was pulled from rotation. The re-edited version, the one with "just kidding" in the corner, was filed away as an archival artifact and never aired again. The Federal Trade Commission tightened its guidance on puffery in national advertising. From then on, any fantastical promotional element had to carry visible on-screen fine print. Not for actual sale. Promotional purposes only. Maximum redemption value. That white 9-point type that now runs along the bottom of every beer commercial, every phone ad, every fast food promotion and sweepstakes spot in the country. The disclaimer you have read 10,000 times without ever once reading it. A real part of it traces back to one handwritten order form, mailed from a Seattle post office on a Tuesday in March. Leonard sold his share of the case to Hoffman after the appeal. Then he left. He moved to Alaska in the early 2000s and became a commercial salmon fisherman, and he gave no interview, on the record, about any of it for 22 years. Hoffman stayed in Seattle and kept his photography company. In 2022, Netflix released a 4-part documentary about the whole affair, and the two of them told it on camera for the first time. PepsiCo declined to comment. He did not lie. He did not cheat. He did not break a single rule. He read the catalog, and he mailed the company a check. Somewhere in a PepsiCo archive, there is a re-edited commercial that says "just kidding," and a returned cashier's check for $700,008, and an order form with 2 words on it in pencil. One Harrier jet. 2 words a college student wrote, because he took a company at its word, filed against a company that would spend 3 years and $2 million, proving it had never meant its own. The jet never landed. The fine print did. So the next time a promise crosses your screen in bright, confident letters, and a smaller line runs quietly along the bottom of the frame, it is worth asking which of the two the company would actually defend in court. John Leonard asked that question first. He is somewhere in Alaska now, pulling salmon out of cold water, and the answer he found is printed at the bottom of nearly every advertisement you will see for the rest of your life.